Who can zakat be given to?
Zakat can be given regardless of faith to any person who is in need. So this is something of again a misconception, a grave misconception. People think that zakat can only be given to Muslims. First of all, the Quran has not specified at all. It mentions the heads of the zakat in verse 60 of Surah Tawbah, the 9th surah. And you can see that it starts off with the words, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. The first head of zakat are the poor people. But it never says that these are the poor people of the Muslims. It never says that these are the needy people who belong to the Muslims. What has actually happened is that there is a certain narrative of the Prophet which has been misconstrued. And in that narrative, the words are تُؤْخَذُ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ وَتُرَدُّ إِلَى فُقَرَائِهِمْ. The Arabic words which mean that zakat is taken from their rich and returned to their poor. So the pronoun there has been interpreted to mean, well, it refers to the Muslim society. Whereas what has been actually meant there is that in those times, zakat collectors would be given this job to go and collect zakat. It was not these modern times in which the state would collect zakat in such a way that people would come and pay that zakat at source, as is the case today. So we would have this concept, what we call as mutasaddiq. A mutasaddiq is a person who is called a tax collector. He would go to various tribes, and that tribe would then pay zakat as a whole. And it is towards them that once a question arose that, well, you are pocketing our money and where are you taking it? So that question arose at that time, and the answer given was, well, we are not going to pocket it ourselves. We are not going to own that money. We are just going to grab it from you, take it from you, and deposit it in the public treasury. So it's being taken to you and returned to yourself. It's not that we who are going to benefit. So it was basically absolving the tax collectors of this question that they are not going to pocket the money. They are just going to collect it and deliver it to the Baitul Mal or the public treasury so that it could be returned to the society. So this is perhaps the cause of misconception. Otherwise, as far as zakat is concerned, it can be given to any individual regardless of his faith, regardless of whatever he or she believes, regardless of gender. It's basically a fund in this particular background to help individuals in any way. And it is absolutely erroneous to believe that it is just meant for Muslims.
So is zakat imposed on non-Muslims too?
It is not. Zakat cannot be imposed on non-Muslims. If non-Muslims become a part of a Muslim state, and because of the fact that today we are living in a era in which we have nation states. So in nation states where are non-Muslims, with them, whatever the treaty is, whatever the terms and conditions are of living in a Muslim country, they can be negotiated. But as far as zakat is concerned, it cannot be imposed on them. It cannot be forcibly imposed. You see, the difference is on Muslim citizens, it can be forcibly imposed. They cannot refute it or reject it. They have to pay it. But for non-Muslims, it has to be a negotiation. They have to pay something to, of course, benefit from the services which are provided by the state. But then that is something which has to be on the basis of a negotiation.
So this is where the disconnect, I think that the confusion happens. Like the jizya is not anymore valid after the audience of Prophet has died, the generation has gone.
Right.
So, and now we cannot impose zakat on non-Muslims, but we can give charity to non-Muslim, money out of. So it's kind of like, doesn't make sense. Like, what are non-Muslim in a Muslim majority society given?
See, they are protected minorities. They are minorities whenever they live in Muslim states as individuals, especially I'm talking about nation states, that they have equal rights in all cases. They have equal worship rights, they have equal voting rights, they have all sorts of equal rights. But as far as, because you see, zakat is a religious directive imposed on Muslims. It is like saying that you make non-Muslims, force them to come and pray in the mosques and tell them, well, you have to pray as well. Because of the fact that this is a specific directive addressed towards the Muslims. They are required to pray. They are required to give zakat. So for non-Muslims, it has to be a negotiation which has to be mutually, settled. And there could be various ways of working at it. For example, you can look at various models which exist in the society today in which developed states are taking that taxation. And I can tell you that if you analyze that, you'll find out that in most cases, such is the nature of that just system of zakat, you never know that those non-Muslims would even settle for the fact that, well, this is something which is very, very congenial to ourselves as well. It is only when you present zakat as a non-taxable charity item that you cannot make them understand this. If you make them understand that this is how we run the state, it's going to be returned to you. And by the way, one important thing is that in most non-Muslim countries, the taxation rate is exorbitant. It's so high. If they are told that this is the upper limit, a Muslim government cannot simply go beyond it, and this is the upper bracket, I think they'll fall for it, because you see, this was one of the weapons which was found in the hands of a ruler that could really exploit his subjects or citizens. But it is here that the Almighty made it absolutely evident that a Muslim ruler or Muslim rulership has no authority to impose its own say in this regard. The percentages have been fixed divinely by the Almighty, and they cannot be in any way breached. And if ever they need to be breached or increased, then it has to be through their consent. And this consent can only be given to people or to a government which has earned credibility. I mean, if a government is the government of, for example, the Caliph Umar, and he, of his stature and nature, would demand some extra money for the welfare of the state, no one would object to it, because you see, the services that the state is giving to them and the nature of justice it is providing them would inspire them to give some extra money. So if you make your credibility, if you prove themselves to be worthy individuals as governors of a polity, you can clearly see that if more money is needed, then with their consent, you can take that money. But it has to be with their consent.
So if I understand correctly, zakat is a religious compulsion for Muslims in a Muslim living
Absolutely.
majority,
Right.
but not a religious compulsion for non-Muslims, but they can be compelled to pay other forms of taxes to be part of society.
You have to tell them that.
And they can pick either zakat or
it's
zakat
on their
model.
choice, because you see, they are benefiting from the services of the state. I mean, like education and health and all those things, and that money is being returned to them. So it has to be something that has to be imposed on them. Of course, this is something which cannot be a zakat. It can be something which has to be mutually agreed, and even it can be enforced. You see, at times there are precedents in which you say, well, this is going to be the zakat. And another thing is that legislation can be done on this as well. I mean, legislation in the parliament can be done, and again, that legislation will be done by a majority vote. That if we have non-Muslim citizens, then this should be the rate of taxation. And I think that this is perhaps the best way, or one of the very plausible ways to resolve the situation, that instead of just leaving it in the dark, the parliament itself they will have their representatives in the parliament. Non-Muslims will have their representatives, and they can talk about all these things. None of them will say that we are not going to pay any tax.
Yeah.
You have to be reasonable. So if you talk reason, you'll definitely get a consent.
So they can either pick paying regular taxes, or they can
Or
be
any other
included into zakat system.
That is it.
Or
legislate afresh.
Yeah. And can a Muslim majority state ask the people to pay more taxes than zakat in a certain situation?
I think that again this matter has to be settled by the parliament. Okay. If you delegate this matter to the parliament, the parliamentarians should debate.
My question was that does religion stops ruler from having some extra tax imposed on them, even in some special situation, or they can just...
I think that if you draw an analogy, if Muslims are being charged with a particular rate, and you cannot go beyond that rate without their consent, I think it should perhaps be a model for them, that they should not go beyond this model for non-Muslims as well, unless there are some specific circumstances or exceptional circumstances. This could be a model.
Or some,
or of course, a public emergency.
Yeah.